From the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, this is the Dental Lighthouse podcast. We take questions from anyone in the dental profession and discuss what it takes to win not only in dentistry, but in life. Business, leadership, relationships, parenting, health and wellness, money management, nothing is off limits on the Dental Lighthouse podcast. I'm Jason Tanoory, your host, and have over 20 years of experience to pull from. Learn from my mistakes and let me help you collapse time so you can become the best version of yourself. Yo, Dr. Jason here, Dental Lighthouse podcast. Super excited on this chilly Friday morning. Very chilly in upstate New York. But I am heated up because I get an opportunity to talk to one of my best friends in the business, one of the most knowledgeable guys that I know. And I'm trying to say this from a position of humility, although it won't come across as that. I just love talking to people that are a little bit bigger and a little bit more experienced than me. And Dr. Steve Markowitz is just that person. So, Steve, I'm not going to rattle off a bio for you, but I would love for you to just share with our listeners a little bit of your history, a little bit of where you come from, kind of just share with the group why what you're about to talk about has some validity. You've had some brain damage, so you've earned a spot.
Huh.
So, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on, and let's hear about it.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. Jason, I've known you for years, and anytime we get a chance to talk, I come away from that conversation what I feel like as a better person. So when you were like, we're going to record our conversations, I was like, let's go.
No doubt,
So
no doubt.
I'm excited. I'm excited to be able to listen back because every time we talk, I'm like, I wish I recorded that conversation so I could go back and like take notes on what we talked about. So I'm a multi-practice owner outside Boston, Massachusetts. Been doing this my whole life. I've shared my story many times on different platforms, but I was introduced to dentistry. My dad's a dentist. I just wanted to be like him. He was the coolest guy, I thought. And he was an entrepreneurial dentist before it was the cool thing to be. He had a large practice about an hour outside Boston, and had associates and all the fun stuff that he thought dentistry could offer patients. And he took just wildly great care of his patients and his team. And I just thought he was just amazing. My first year at dental school, he had a really bad ski accident, lost 2/3 of his brain function. He's still alive today, but can't really talk, can't really walk. Very different person than he was. So my introduction to dentistry was meeting with my parents' accountant, hiring associates to fill my dad's seat, and just learning to trust people before I even knew what the heck they were doing. And it shaped my view on what dentistry can be. And I really, the name of our company is MFD. It stands for My F and Dad. It's a tribute to everything that he wanted to create in dentistry. And I'm sure that if he could just have a moment of clarity and we sit down and talk, he would be like, what the hell just happened here? This is really, really cool.
Yeah.
And it's not that we don't have challenges every day, we do. But I'm really proud of the 150 something people that I get the pleasure of serving and leading, and our 24 doctors that I'm really proud of the level of care that we provide, and then we just keep going at it until we mess up, and then continue at it after that again.
We either win or we learn, right? We don't ever.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah. So you guys can understand just with Steve breaking down that little bio, why I love talking to him. He's just a great person and a good sounding board for me. And his size and my size are somewhat comparable. So we just would deal with sets of problems that other people maybe aren't blessed to deal with. But before we hit record today, we were just having a really good conversation on what we wanted to talk about, and it ultimately landed on, and Steve, correct me if you feel like this isn't the right language, but let's call it ceilings of complexity, where, and I think this resonates with no matter what size you're at, you ultimately come across ceilings of complexity It could be number of employees, could be revenue, could be number of locations. It doesn't really matter. And Steve and I are kind of coming up on a similar level of complexity, and we're just trying to figure out the best way to to break through it, for lack of a better term. So, um, let's start the conversation with, in your own words, Steve, how would you describe your ceiling of complexity, um, and what type of realizations are you having now that you kind of are aware of it?
Yeah, I think one thing that you and I, Jason, have always talked about of like we love our organizations. It's part of our identity. And one thing that we've said many times is to each other is if we get to a point where we're no longer the best person to be leading the organization, we owe it to our team, we owe it to our patients to find somebody who can. And for me, I always thought like I remember leaving my like the first day when I bought our fourth office. I left there thinking like I could do this a million times. I am so stinking good at this. The team loved the introduction. I felt great. We had an awesome doctor there. It was like rinse and repeat. How many times can I do this? And then you just don't know what you don't know and you hit a wall. And for me, I felt like that was um, around 140 people. Just being able to influence through influencers. There's certain now structure where there's only so many people and so much time in the day where I can make the decisions. I need to actually rely on not just my leadership team, but managers within the office and decision makers within the office to make sure that we're living our standard. And I, the movie Multiplicity, I'm not sure if anyone's even remembers it, but it was like a movie with Michael Keaton about cloning. And at one point, they made a copy of a copy, and that copy was an idiot. And I think that understanding what I felt was like, all right, I'm talking to my team. Um, I feel like I'm saying all these great words, and is what I'm saying actually what's happening within my organization? And it felt, the worst thing to me is feeling any lack of genuineness that I'm delivering to my team. And sometimes, more recently, I felt like, am I still, do I still truly believe at our size that everyone in our organization feels this way about patient care, about the way that we take care of one another? And that was hard for me to digest.
Yeah, well said. I want to rewind the tape just a second, just to make sure that the listeners understand kind of what I'm hoping occurs through this conversation. So, we both have relatively similar sizes of organizations, and we're kind of running up against the same ceiling of complexity. And at the end of the day, I think what it really comes down to is there's a skill set that you and I have, or that owners in general have, and only they can do what owners can do. And we have to check our egos aside and come to the realization that there's a finite amount of time in the day, in the week, and if there's only specific things that we can do, then we have to empower and delegate the rest of these responsibilities to other key people. And it does, and that philosophy is core no matter how big you are. I had a coaching call at 10 o'clock this morning before I got on the call with Steve, in 7 employee practice, one doctor. And he was dealing with his own ceiling of complexity where he's trying to run the business, trying to figure out the financials, and he's also trying to revamp his hygiene program. And we really just got to the point where, well, maybe you should outsource those responsibilities to someone else because you don't have the capacity to do it. So we ended the call with him basically having an action item. I'm going to reach out to Rachel Wall, and I'm going to see what's going to be involved with someone on her team coming in here and completely taking the responsibility of overhauling our hygiene department, and owning that. And I think that for a employee office and what we're dealing with are very, very similar, right? We're
100%.
we're to the point where there's only a few there's only a few select things that only we can do, and we have to let go of the vine, to use traction terminology, and empower and delegate other people in our organization to do the things that we no longer have the capacity for. But to your point, Steve, how do we do that without losing the feel or the genuineness of how we even got to this point in the first place?
Yeah. And I think that's what I'm trying to understand and work through. I told you a story before we got on about working with my business coach. I've worked with this guy for 3 years now. And he never has an opinion really. He always wants me to figure it out for myself, so I'll ask questions. And for the first time ever, he had an opinion. And it was one of those punches to the gut that you're like, oh my goodness, I am learning so much about myself. So I was telling him, we recently brought on a COO. That's how one of my methods to uh, overcome our level of complexity now. Um, and he was asking me how it was going, and I was telling him it's going great, and I was just sharing this off the cuff conversation about a conversation I was having with her, and just some. I was like, I was talking to her about a doctor, and I think we're really gaining trust. I was venting to her about some situation, and he stopped me in his tracks. He was like, "You did what?" And I was like, "I was just talking to her, just telling her about things that were going on in between my ears. I was venting about one of the doctors, and I thought they were doing something stupid." And he's like, "You can't, you can't effing do that." And he's like, I was like, "What?" Because he's never had an opinion. So I stopped me in my tracks. And he's like, "Don't you ever do that." He's like, "Write this down." He's like, "Do you want to be the CEO of this company?" And I said, I think I do. I guess I do. He's like, "If you do, you can never do that." And it was one of those like aha moments, like that's my blind spot.
Yeah.
I up until now, my genuineness of an openness, and if someone asks me how I feel, I'm going to share everything, which I thought was a gift,
Right.
um, is a gift only to a certain point. And what I really came out of that conversation was I actually love that part of who I am. And I love that part of the organization and people knowing me and connected to me on that level. But I also know that I can't get to the next step. I can't lead more people. And that's probably all that I'm feeling. That's probably the weight of what I'm feeling is that if I want us to continue to grow and open more locations and serve more patients, I actually have to be different. And that's going to feel really weird for me. And that's what I'm working through and trying to understand like, is that really what I want? And how do I maintain connection but act in a different way?
Man, so much to unpack there. And
Yeah, I'm really messed up. Thanks.
yeah, I wish I had a couch. Uh, so yeah, I think what you're saying is so spot on that as owners or founders, or as the one that's kind of running things, we have a choice, right? And I think we need to have absolute clarity with what we are choosing because I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like we're both coming up to the realization that we can't have our cake and eat it too. We can't
Yeah.
behave like we've always behaved, yet still scale and grow like we want to. And I shared with you a story before we hit record, and I'll share it with our listeners. My operations person, Amy, who you guys have heard me talk about on the show, Amy's been with me for uh, over 15 years. She started as a greeting coordinator and has worked her way up to be the director of operations in our company. And over the last couple of years, very similar to what you were describing, Steve, of hitting the ceiling of complexity, we've kind of come to the realization that we'll always figure out the right answer, but it's getting frustrating going through two or three or four iterations of what we think is the right answer, only to realize it's not, and then finally figuring out the right answer. So it's filled with friction, it costs time and energy and money. So we decided to bring in an outside consultant to look at our blind spots and say, how do we grow and how do we fulfill our purpose of serving patients, team members, and communities at the highest level without all of the brain damage that we're in ensuing ourselves by thinking we have it figured out only to realize that we don't. And long story short, this consultant got all of my office managers in a room and we were having a very vulnerable, transparent conversation. And it ultimately came out that one of the reasons that we're struggling is because so many people come to me either in person or via text message or via Slack, and they're asking me questions that I love because I feel empowered that I'm a resource and I'm answering these questions for these people. But these are like frontline dental assistants and hygienists that are, in theory, not to sound bureaucratic, but that are like two or three levels down on leadership. And by me feeling good about myself that I can answer these questions, what I'm basically doing is cutting off my leaders at the knees, completely bypassing them. And they're now not even aware that I made a decision. Or what has happened more frequently is the hygienist goes to their leader, doesn't get the answer that they want. So then they come to me because they know that I'm so approachable. And then I'll just give them the answer that they want. And it was a blind spot for me because I felt like I was actually being resourceful and helping. But the office managers, when we were in this meeting last week or 2 weeks ago, painted a very different picture. They basically said, "You're the reason that we're not able to do things the way that you say you want to do them." And I so appreciate the fact that they had enough trust in me that they could be open about that. But it was such a slap in the face that, like, oh shit, like I'm the reason that this thing is so friction filled. And I'm going to have to change my behavior and not feel so needed because, yes, I do want to feel needed. But what's more important to me is to scale this thing and serve as many people and employees and communities as I can. So if I had to make a decision between the two of them, it's the latter. It's like I really want to help as many people as I can. It's not the desire to feel needed by my employees. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I think one thing to add, and I've known Amy for a long time. She's an absolute rock star. Your team is full of these amazing people. So it's not when we bring in consultants or higher level members to our team. I think it's important, and one thing that is a challenge is to not make them feel like they're there because they couldn't do it.
Right.
It's
100%.
and I think that's important and something that I'm working through here too. Of all right, yes, we need new perspective, but it's not because you guys suck. It's actually a me thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, but I will take it a step further and say you don't intentionally suck. Like
Oh no, no,
you're
no,
not
no.
you're not waking up and jumping out of bed and saying, how can I screw over my COO and make her job 10 times more difficult than it needs to be? You're just
Yep.
doing what you've always done, just like
Yeah.
I'm always doing what I've always done. And then for me to have an outside perspective of like, okay, well, it's clear to me that you need to stop doing that. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, right? Because you're not intentionally sabotaging your own
No, but like I think for both of us, selfishly, and I don't know, we have never had this conversation, but selfishly, the reason why I love coaching is because it makes me feel good.
Yeah,
It makes me feel like I am able to help someone who isn't maybe as far along in the journey, and I can share my experience. And sometimes after I get off a coaching call or someone that I helped, I leave feeling way better than the person I gave the information to.
yeah,
And I think that's something that I'm wrestling with of like, okay, I actually feel really good when I know the answer. That fills me up
yeah,
to help empower people or give them the information that they can now go and help more people or be better at their job or whatever it is. So that's where I think my struggle is that I actually enjoy being in that seat and feeling like I can offer solutions to people. Uh, and now I know that it's not that I can't do that; it just has to be different.
yeah,
And the level and what I'm where I've come to is it's not it's the level of the problem that comes to me that I am now needing to solve, and not every problem that comes to me that I need to solve.
Yeah, so true. It's like, Ramsey says, there's only two things that I do now in my organization is I develop new things and I fix broken things. And that's really all that he does, right? Um,
Yeah,
but your point about how we feel inside when you get off a coaching call, it's so true. It's I do a lot of coaching now, and when I'm able to help someone and see the result of my mentorship to them, it fills up my cup. There's no question. And I will continue to do that outside of my organization, but I almost have gained the perspective of inside my organization, I'm stealing that joy from other people because they're fully
yeah,
capable of doing it, but I'm cutting them off at the knees and taking that joy because I want it, right? So, in my own
yeah,
warped way, I'm just saying to myself, I'm being selfish because the
yeah.
reality is five or six people in leadership can solve this problem. I'm just going to do it first so I fill up my cup. And I've really tried to pivot that mindset and say, well, Amy can do it, and Shannon can do it, and Jen can do it, and Megan can do it. And I'm going to give them the opportunity to do it and then empower them where if they can't do it or figure it out, then loop me in. And just based on my own brain damage and scar tissue, I'll help facilitate a conversation to help them come up with a solution.
Yeah, that perspective makes so much sense. I've never thought of it like that. So, all right, I wrote that down for people who aren't
Well,
watching.
we're recording it though, so you don't have to write it down.
Oh man. Okay.
So, so, so let's get granular. Let's get tactical. So, we've talked about, some theoretical stuff here. Now that you have a little bit more clarity, your blind spots have been identified, um, through the last couple of weeks of working with some of these new hires in leadership. Do you have a do you have a cookbook? Do you have a playbook? What is your roadmap going to be to try to not be the bottleneck?
It's been super intentional, but I am purposely not putting myself in positions to hear or get the information, and then pushing people in most every conversation, even if I do provide information. I might say, this is what I think. I would also make sure Vanessa feels that same way too, or ask her thoughts. And the more that I can get in the habit and then have them see it happen the way and get the even better support, um, the less it will, the better I'll feel about it, and the less it will come to me. And then, but the next step for me is just now, how do I maintain that connection? And one thing that I'm spending my time on now is, there were lists and presentations and things that I've put together but never followed through with because all of the day-to-day crap was interfering. So now I'm going back to those things of like, all right, let me go back and open up my customer service phone skills presentation that I put together in 2018. Let me see if I can fine tune that and actually now spend more of my time in with larger groups in the organization, presenting um, on how I envision us to even take better care of our patients and better care of each other.
Yeah, so well said. I mean, the way that you have such a level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence where if it's a big message that needs to be disseminated to a big group like your 150 employees, I can't think of anyone better than you to deliver that message. So, we talked at the beginning of this call about you and I being disciplined to only do what we are wired to do and that no one else can do. I would guess that there's no one else in your organization that can do that. Just like in my organization, if I'm going to give a message that really is going to resonate and land well, I want to be the person to give it because I feel like I'm the best equipped to do it. Um,
Yes.
and if I can let go of all of the other tactical, granular responsibilities that I have so many other great leaders that are capable of managing, then it frees me up to work on just those things that you're referencing. So, which
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think The addition is just the phrase right now. I'm the best at that right now.
Yeah.
And that is what I'm actually working through and trying to let go because for a long time I was the best person to answer all those questions.
Right.
And that made the most sense. And now right now I'm not.
Yeah.
And I think the wonderful thing and the continued challenge about business and dental practice ownership is it's never set it and forget it. And I continue to learn that every day. And that we're as we evolve and our needs of the needs of the organization change, I better evolve and change with it, or we're going to have a lot more of these challenging, frictionful, tough times. And I think it's through conversations like this, through finding true coaches, mentors, and uncovering those blind spots that what I thought was a strength actually turned into be a blind spot of mine. There was no way of me uncovering without those types of conversations, and I would be sitting here probably hitting my head against the wall for the next couple of years, wondering why everyone else sucks and they're not doing what I want them to.
So true, brother. Like, it, and I even think about that, right? So I 100% get what you're saying, and I agree with it. Um, so what is an obvious thing that currently the way we're structured that I can do, or that I personally feel that I'm the best adapted to do it? We're in the practice of acquiring a dental practice in April. Have a signed letter of intent, and I got a feeling it'll go through. And I did a lot of due diligence, ran the numbers, looked at the market demographics, blah blah blah. Like, there's no one else in my organization currently that I feel can do it at the level that I do it. But to suggest that there's no one else there, outside of my organization that could do it. I mean, there's 4-year finance degree majors that are heads of business development at growing DSOs that would look at my matrix of analyzing these and laugh. They're like,
Laugh.
"You
Yep.
are you are so ignorant, Jason, that you think
Yeah.
you're doing it." So yeah, I mean, it's again to your point. Like, we don't know what we don't know, and we have all of these blind spots. Currently, I wear that hat, and I'm excited about scaling to the point where I can bring someone on that owns that responsibility and maybe uses me as a sounding board, but can come to me with a ton of confidence and say, we need to acquire this practice, or we need to walk away from this opportunity. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's what, to your point, I think that's what makes the fluidity of what we're doing really exciting, at least as an entrepreneur or dentist.
Yeah. And I think it's like reinventing yourself while the organization is still in motion. And it's a really tall task, as we are asking different things of ourselves while still going to the same places and working with the same people.
Yeah, so true. So true. As we wrap up this conversation, Dr. Steve, any final words of wisdom? Do you want to you want to take your wand and just, be Confucius and give some.
I do have one thing that I wanted to make sure that I said, and I've said this to you in private, but I listened to every one of your episodes, and I had I think it was like a salesperson. I can't remember. Someone was like, "Who are you? Who are your mentors? Like, who do you look up to?" And I was like, "If you ever have the chance to come across, there's a dentist, a doctor up in upstate New York. If you ever have the chance to come across Jason Tanoory, I need you to tell him how much impact he has had on my life and how much I love that dude." And I needed to get that out here in this setting because you have no idea. There are you wrote me a thank you note. I don't know, maybe it was like 20, it might have been 2019. I don't know. It sits on my desk. It's still there. It's for me. Um, this is one of those special relationships of like I look up to that guy. I'm so impressed, maybe sometimes jealous of how you look at the world and look at the world of dental practice ownership and leadership, and I just think the world of you, and I needed to get that out in a public setting. So you can put that on record and repeat as many times as you want now too.
I'm just gonna put it on repeat and then fall asleep listening to it. It's like
Yeah,
like Stuart Smalley, right? Just
yeah,
like yeah.
you are good enough.
That was unexpected, and I so appreciate it. And this is not going to sound sincere, uh, because I'm basically copying what you're saying, but there's very few people in this world that I can have legitimate conversations with about some of the pain points that I'm experiencing, both personally and professionally. Um, and you are one of those few people that kind of sit on my imaginary board of directors, and
Yeah,
I love reaching out to you via text message, cell phone, however we can connect, and just gaining some of your wisdom. And you've had such an influence on my life from afar. Just want to make sure that you realize that. So thank you very
I appreciate it, and that means the world. Thank you.
All right, so guys, I hopefully you gained tons of wisdom from Dr. Markowitz and a little bit from myself. If you have any questions or concerns, follow-up stuff, you can go to dentallighthouse.com. Reach out to me via email or text. If you want to get a hold of Steve, or Steve, are you open to inquiries about anything and
Of
everything?
course, yeah, always.
What's some contact information to reach you at?
My probably my email is the best way. I don't know if I want to get my cell phone out yet, even
Yeah.
though if you search any of my Google reviews, the negative ones, my cell phone is on that.
So what's
But Dr.
let's do email.
Dr. M.
What's a good email?
Yeah, Dr. M, DRM at mfddental.com. Again, I love talking to dentists, dental practice owners, or anyone in the business, and sharing my experience. And if there's anything that I can help with, I'd love to be a resource.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Steve Markowitz. Thank you. That wraps up another episode of the Dental Lighthouse podcast. You have a choice today. Choose to be a lighthouse. Lighthouses are powerful and steadfast. They are beacons of light for others to reference when life gets turbulent. Go out into the world today and become a lighthouse for someone. Give more than you get. True joy comes from serving others. Start today. I'm Jason Tanoory, your host. Thank you for listening to the Dental Lighthouse podcast. For more information, podcast show notes, or links to anything that we have discussed today, please check out our website, thedentallighthouse.com. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to get on the show, please email us at podcast@thedentallighthouse.com.